were you trying to do, and what do you hope it has achieved? So we'll start with Meredith Lake.
Well, that in a way, it's a very difficult question to answer, but I guess the book in a way is what it is. The title says it's about. It's about the Bible in Australia, not as you might imagine religious history, but it's the story of what all kinds of people in the place we now call Australia have done with the Bible, the ways they've encountered it, whether it's a tattoo under a person's skin, a fragment in our language, a text, a totemic object, a source of doctrinal dispute. I kind of had a very fluid idea of what the Bible was and the forms it might take. I don't want to, it's not about a static thing that's always necessarily a book or whose content is necessarily agreed, but about the kind of, as a mobile thing in motion, what different kinds of Australians have done with that, whether they've believed it to be in some sense a sacred word, whether they've believed it to be a tool of oppression, something that's buttressed a discourse that has been destructive, even murderous, and everything in between. It's a story about activists, novelists, suffragists, lots of colonists, but also people who resist colonisation with the language that colonists introduced, the theological language that British colonists introduced with the Bible. So it's quite, it's in a way, I tried to rethink what it might look like to tell the story of Australia since the late 18th century with the contest over the Bible as a dynamic central theme. And that was a fascinating project to me, partly because my background, I've always been interested in kind of the religious aspects of settler colonial Australia. Even as an undergrad, that was what I picked for my, essay topics. What did the Earth chaplains think about early Sydney? And from there, even as an undergrad, I've always wanted to try and join the dots between religious discourse and the creation of a settler colony, and all the complexities and difficulties of that, and how the text of the Bible crosses cultural boundaries. What happens when it's not the property of a colonising European, but the property of someone who's demanding their land back? Those kinds of stories. What do we even mean by the Bible? What do we even mean by Australia? And so in a way, the book was about processing those kinds of questions and throwing them into the air. Can you tell the story of Australia or the stories of Australia in that way? What does religious history look like once it's not the property of the believer, but of the doubter, the skeptic, the activist? And so one of the reviews that the book received said, this book raises many more questions than it can reasonably answer. And I was thrilled. Because that's exactly what I wanted to do. Religious history gets such a bad rap often, but I wanted to show that actually, if you care about colonialism, if you care about feminism, if you care about our ecological, the catastrophe that we're facing, all these things have theological baggage to them that's contested from the outset here in Australia. I guess I started writing at a time, 2014, when I guess the history wars had taken on categories that pitted a Judeo-Christian narrative against a secular, diverse, unresolved settler narrative, settler colonial narrative, and that you had to kind of pick which Australia is true. And I wanted to say that if you quarantine the story of Christianity and its reception to one of those stories, you're missing so much of the argument, and that actually to understand colonialism, you have to be talking about the way that's bound up religion and empire. That's a crucial theme. But if you want to talk about Judeo-Christianity, you need to talk about skepticism and the non-white use of the Bible to really understand that. So I wanted to bust out of some of those categories, out of those grooves, and tell the stories that didn't fit them. And I had a great time doing it. It was great fun in terms of storytelling, but I think it really brought together things I've been thinking about my whole life, what it means to live in this place more justly, more responsibly, questions I haven't answered, but are still very much live for me as I try to process the past and where we might be now. So anyway, that's what the book's about.
That's great. That's really exciting. I also love that idea about raising more questions than it can feasibly answer as a criticism. I mean, I think that's
well,
wonderful.
I don't think it was a criticism. It was Alan Atkinson who said that, and I think I felt like he really understood better than I did, perhaps, what the book was doing. So
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.